I will say, I think to pull it forward a little bit, in the age of AI, this kind of personal software is going to become a lot more prevalent because not everybody can write software. The amount of tools that I write, I literally just created a quick script with Cursor where I just agent moded it, like YOLO agent moded it, that for my teams pulls all the PRs that they've merged and then creates prompts AI to create a changelog out of them for other stakeholders in the organization, so that I don't have to keep monitoring the PRs and then put it together and all this stuff. And I'm like, the script took me 5 minutes to write. It's maybe 500 lines of code. It would have taken me, an hour or two to write. Now it takes me 5 minutes to write because I just cursor agent moded it. It fucking YOLOs it anyway. I don't even have to do anything anymore. I just tell it what I want and it makes it happen. It's crazy. It's completely insane. So I think there's going to be a lot more coming like that, where people build just their own little tools. And the other part to that too is like philosophically or maybe even practically, building generic software is really hard. The difference between sort of building software that works for your specific use case versus building software that works for every possible use case is not just like half more effort or twice the effort. It's probably 10 to 100 times the effort. For Shopify to make Shopify in a way that works for all merchants, even the initial version that Toby built, like, has to be 10 times to 100 times more complicated than just building one store that works. Do you know what I'm saying? And so in the age of AI, people being able to build their own software actually means that a lot more software will get created, because it's much easier to build software for just yourself versus build software for everybody. Like, for example, at Shopify, it turns out GitHub's API has a really strong rate limit. Like, you can't use the search API all that much, which is what I use to access the PRs. And so you have to cache the PRs locally. So I literally just write to a file on my local machine, and then I push it up to GitHub repository so that it's stored. And then I just go through the file system and pass all the PR data to an AI. And it's like, for me to actually ship this as a SaaS app that other people can use would be like, now I would have to set up a database and then store the PR data in there and cache it in there and then sync it every time and then make sure that it's all up to date all the time and do all this extra work that I actually don't have to do because it's just my own use. It's just on my own machine. Like, I actually don't have to do that. You know what I mean? And so the effort for me to turn this into, never mind, then you have to talk about user authentication and building and whatever other shit that you have to do to actually build a production-ready app. And so that's a really interesting evolution that I'm thinking a lot about, because I end up creating a lot of tools for myself right now.
That's crazy. You should mention the changelog generation is the problem you solved recently, because I just the other day decided out of the blue to build a thing to do that. I just linked it in chat. I call it Chronicler, which is essentially like a SaaS that generates changelogs based on the range of commit hashes or PRs or release tags.
I'm going to steal your prompt.
Yeah, please do. I don't think I've spent a lot of time on the prompt, to be perfectly honest. I ended up building out auth and database and everything, etc. But I think it's getting okay results. You can try it out. It's deployed.
I'll try it out. That's the other thing. Oh, that's the other thing I should mention. The interesting, the other part to this is that at a company like Shopify, which has, we have thousands of employees, and we're a public company that powers, I think the latest public stat is more than 10% of e-commerce in the US. There's a lot of money and a lot of people using Shopify. I think the latest public stat was 800 million people bought something on a Shopify store last year. That's a lot of people. And so that if you think about it, I don't know what the latest statistic is, but like something like 6 billion people are connected to the internet. So one of 6 people that are on the internet, that's like the possible market, but literally bought something in a Shopify store last year, which is crazy. And the reason I say this is because at companies like this, of which there's a lot of them, and they generally pay a lot of money for software, it's actually really hard to buy software because the security requirements are insane. Like, for Shopify to buy a piece of software, I love your app, Goose, and there's no way we could use it, just because it would take me a year to go through the procurement process, and then the security team would be like, why don't you just do it yourself? This is like, don't pay for this. Just go do it yourself. We don't know who this guy is. We don't know where the data is stored. We need to analyze, SOC 2 and all this stuff. And so it's actually, at large companies even more so, much easier for people to make their own software than to buy software. Because by me making software, I'm just on my local machine. I'm just accessing the GitHub API with my own personal access token. And I'm just storing the data on my own work machine that anyway Shopify secures. And then I'm just running an AI that Shopify provides an AI proxy internally. And so I'm just running AI against it that Shopify approves of. And then I get my results, I don't have to go through security. I don't have to go through procurement. I don't have to do any of that because I'm not buying anything. I'm not engaging with an external vendor. It's all just locally. And so there's something to that world in the AI age, or whatever you want to call it, where a lot more software is going to get made, and part of that is a lot more personal software, and part of that is also just the argument for build versus buy just got way, way, way weaker because it became much easier to build something than to buy something by like a large margin. Sorry, that was a random side note ramble there.
Yeah,
but
no, this is actually an excellent point. But what if the thing you want to integrate in your company is open source project? Then it's a bit different, right, of a story.
It can be, and then again, there it depends on where the data is stored. If you can actually self-host it, but then the other problem is too. So then here's the other thing about working at a really large company like Shopify. Even which services are created is managed internally, right? I can't even go to GitHub and just click new repository. I have to go through an internal tool called Services Internal to create a new service. So that because otherwise, what ends up happening is all these people create all these random GitHub repositories that do all these random things. The security team doesn't know about them, and then one of them eventually leaks some API key and it creates a huge incident, right? And so they have to manage everything. And and it's not restricted necessarily. There's just internal paths for getting things done, right? If you want to create a GitHub repository, you got to go to this internal tool so that they know who owns this tool and they can track who the repositories by and whatever else.
And I don't think that's bad either, because like with smaller companies and stuff like that, the circle is a lot smaller. You can be like, hey man, I'm making this new repo, I'm pushing this, yada 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 yada. But with larger companies, I totally get that, because it's funny you mentioned like the new repository. My dad is a computer programmer for a big mortgage bank, and he said that for some of his like changes and stuff like that to get like approved and pushed to production, he has to go through nearly like 4 to 5 weeks of like meetings and approvals for like sub like 4 to 5 lines of code in like Rex and COBOL and stuff like that. And like he can't, and for what I can go into, it's like he can't create stuff without getting verifications from 9 different other people, and none of those 9 people are ever working during the same time. So it takes forever. But I don't think that's a bad thing either, even though it's a massive inconvenience. It sucks, but it's also an additional level of security where you have that peace of mind knowing, okay, so the new intern isn't going to break prod on his first day by accidentally pushing all of our Stripe publish keys right like that. So I don't think it's bad, but it's definitely a hassle, and I can relate to that.